billions of people on this earth, God chose one man to find the most incredible locations, ancient locations that are talked about in the Bible. These are some of the most important archaeological discoveries of all time that will absolutely prove that the Bible is real. This was a mission that God gave to only one man, Ron Wyatt. Some of the most famous biblical stories talked about in the Bible are actually real locations found here on earth by Ron Wyatt, who was supernaturally guided by God to find things like Noah's Ark, Mount Sinai, where God gave the Ten Commandments, the Red Sea crossing, where God parted the sea. These are all locations that Ron Wyatt was guided to supernaturally by God. This is one documentary you do not want to miss.
Dad tried to get permission for 4 years to go to Saudi Arabia so we could prove that that's Mount Sinai, here's where they crossed, everything, the whole bit, to give everybody the whole story. And they wouldn't give us permission. And he kept applying and kept applying. They would not do it.
3 weary Americans came home Monday night. Ronald Wyatt and his sons Daniel and Ronald Jr. returned to Nashville at the end of an amateur archaeology expedition that landed them in a Saudi Arabian jail. They entered Saudi Arabia illegally, searching for the site of the biblical Mount Sinai. Ronald Wyatt and his sons are with us in the studios of our Nashville affiliate WTVF to tell us all about it. Gentlemen, good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Wyatt, you there in the middle,
Yes.
your sons on either side. Why did you, I didn't know that Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabian territory. Why did you think it was?
We found some chariot parts that looked like the chariots found in King Tut's tomb in the Gulf of Aqaba, west of this Jebel El Lawz. We found these at depths from 60 feet out to 200 feet and over a stretch of about 1.5 miles. And we believe that that was the crossing site.
Thank you very much for joining us from Nashville this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's
nice to be back.
When Ron found the chariot parts in the Gulf of Aqaba, that told him that Mount Sinai lay across the shore there. So when he looked at the flight maps that he was able to get, he saw an area that appeared to be enclosed in the rim of an ancient volcano. And to the best of his figures, he came up with an area of about 5,000 square acres. And he knew that would certainly be large enough to be the camp of the Israelites. He also saw that there was another little amoeba shape just to the other side of it that he thought could likely contain the camp of the mixed multitude that came with the Israelites, because they were told that they could not stay in the camp. They had to stay outside of the camp.
There was over 1 million people that were camped out here at Mount Sinai. So clearly, look at the Gentiles camp there. It's not that much smaller than the Israelites camp. What does that mean? It means that probably the Israelites were about 2/3 of the people, and about 1/3 of them were Gentiles. Do you understand the importance and the meaning of that? It means that when God gave the Ten Commandments, at this location on top of Mount Sinai, he gave them to not only the Israelites, but also to the Gentiles, who were not even allowed to stay inside the camp with the Israelites, because to them, they were not true Israelites, so they would be avoiding them. But God chose not only the Israelites, but these Gentiles. And again, there might have been 200,000-300,000 Gentiles there, which means every single person today needs to understand that God gave the Ten Commandments not only to the Israelites, but to the Gentiles. And he commanded all of them to keep his commandments. Clearly here you can see on the top of that peak there, that mountain, a black-tipped mountain. That's because that's where God came down to give the Ten Commandments, and he was in fire. He literally scorched and burned the whole top of Mount Sinai, which you clearly can see there. And you can see the delineation between the regular rock, which is below, and above, you'll see nothing but black rock. And when they turned some of the boulders over, they found something very unique. They found out underneath was normal rock. It was brownish, the light brown look that you see right here. That's what it looks like underneath the rocks that are up on top where the blackness is, up on top of Mount Sinai. That's because God scorched it with fire. God can be anything he wants, and one of the things he does is he is in flames, in fire, and he can be fire when he wants to. And he literally got their attention at Mount Sinai when he came down on top of that mountain as a big giant fire cloud. And it was on fire, and God literally spoke and gave all of the Israelites as well as the Gentiles that were there the 10 commandments so that they could follow those. Now here we are on top of Mount Sinai, and you clearly can see these black scorched rocks where God came down from heaven and literally scorched it with fire on top of Mount Sinai. And over to the left there, you can see the part that was not touched by the fire. So clearly there is a demarcation line there where God was at and where he was not at. And it appears as though this black rock takes off into the distance for over a quarter of a mile. Do you understand that that means that God can stretch himself out all that distance across this black rock that is on top of Mount Sinai? And again, on top of that, I told you that underneath these black rocks, it's not black. It's actually lighter color.
Those that have examined it tell us that this dark material only extends down for a short distance, and that below that is this grayish material that's typical of the rest of the area around there.
So it's just right on the very top,
Right.
where this blackened, as if it were just burned and singed right there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So Mount Sinai was just one of the locations that God supernaturally guided Ron to discover. Ron discovered close to a dozen sites that are ancient sites that are talked about in the Bible, like Noah's Ark, which is our next subject. And I want everyone to know that there was an amazing miracle that happened that nobody is talking about. So later on in this documentary, I'm going to share with you what that miracle was.
We believe that God has preserved in the earth and under the seas remains of the major events discussed in the Bible. Physical remains, chemical remains, and things that you and I can see, feel, test, and in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah and its sulfur, even taste.
On June 20th, 1987, in the mountains of Ararat, Turkey officially recognized the discovery of Noah's Ark, located on a mountainside about 15 miles south of the volcanic Mount Ararat. The remains of the massive ship were dedicated during a special ceremony in which the guest of honor was Ron Wyatt due to the discovery of the Ark and 10 years of research at the site. The story began in 1957 during the Cold War, when aerial photos taken of eastern Turkey while searching for Soviet missile bases revealed a strange boat-shaped object in the mountains about 6,300 feet above sea level. Life magazine reported on the story after an expedition of the United States went to that site in 1960. Blowing holes in the strange formation, the members of the team came away with the conclusion that there was nothing of any archaeological interest. Ron Wyatt, like many others, read the story in Life magazine, but Ron decided to go to the actual site in Turkey to take a closer look. But Ron had no idea where the Ark was located. All he knows was that it was somewhere near Mount Ararat.
we basically went there to find Noah's Ark. And you know, my dad just kind of worked at the hospital. He just saved up some money. And one day he came home and he said, well guys, I'm flying out to go to Turkey in 3 days to go look for Noah's Ark. And we said, Dad, you gotta take us, you know, because we didn't, you know, we wanted to go. When we flew into Ankara, we got on a bus and we went to the train station. Then we got on a train and we went to Erzurum on the train. And while we're on the train, we're going all through these mountains, and my dad didn't have any coordinates for the boat-shaped object or anything. And so he was saying, guys, we might just have come over here for nothing because I don't have any idea which way we're gonna, how we're gonna find this. Finally got a cab after that and he drove us on down into the town, Dogobazit. And on our way in, our dad told me and my brother, he said, you know, the Bible says it, when 3 or more are gathered, you know, and pray in my name, that he'll answer it. And so he said, we really need to say a prayer that God will help us know which way to look. And so we did, and we were getting close to Dogobazit, the town close to Ararat, and the car stopped, and it was in the middle of the night, and everything just went dead, lights out, everything, and just stopped. So we had to stop real fast in the road, and we had just got done saying that prayer, just not 5-10 minutes before that. And so my father said, why don't we pile a big pile of rocks up here on the side of the road, just in case this is something God did to show us how to find it. And so, well, okay. And we piled a big pile of rocks up, and we get back in the car, and just, the guy shuts the hood because he doesn't see anything, just tries it again, it starts up. And so we drive on down the road some more little ways, and then the car dies again. And so we're thinking, well, this may be just car trouble we're having, but we're gonna pile up some more rocks anyway on the side of the road. And so the same thing happened again. We got back in the car, it died again. We piled up our third pile of rocks. And then the car started and we went on into town real late at night, got a hotel. And then the next day we got a cab and started looking around a little bit, and we drove back out the road we came in on, and we started hiking out. We got some canteens, had one canteen of water. My dad was wearing sandals, like with his feet uncovered, and it was really hot. And so we were hiking up this hill, and our canteen had a hole in it. So we were losing water the whole time, so we drank all the water before it spilled out. And then we found a nice mountain stream, really, really cold water, and we were just hot and burning up. And so we filled our canteen and was drinking the water. It was really tasted good, you know. Figured it was melting down from the ice and stuff. And anyway, from that first rock, we found an anchor stone that was taller than we are. And at the top was a hole. It was teardrop shaped, and there was a big round hole, and the hole was smooth, like it had been rubbed, you know, smooth. And my dad said, that's an anchor stone. That was one of the anchors for Noah's Ark. We found a gravestone that was the shape of Noah's Ark in this graveyard. We showed this to Dad. The next day, I believe, my dad went out and walked over with them. And me and my brother were there too. We walked back out, and my dad said he got to like a hill and he saw the boat-shaped object, but it was getting real late. And then that's when we left for that day. And then that night is when they came to our room and tried to rob us. You know, the miracle of us finding Noah's Ark, the car dying on the side of the road, that was one of the first times that God so directly, quickly answered a prayer. I mean, without a doubt, you know, those were 3 miracles when that car died. And just to be us and our dad, and for us to get to find all that, impossible. So it was all a miracle, every bit of it. We didn't do anything on our own. We prayed about everything and God led us right to it.
This is what Ron Wyatt saw when he looked over the mountain the first night. He saw Noah's Ark right there off in the distance. You can see what looks like a boat-shaped object. And you can see it's huge. It's like 500 feet long. Over to the right is the bow or the front of the ship.
Ron finally made the journey to Turkey. When he saw the boat-shaped object, he saw that it looked just like it did in 1960. And he knew he would need permission to excavate in order to learn anything about what was beneath the surface. So he returned home and enlisted a number of friends to help him pray for an earthquake to reveal more. In late 1978, he learned of an earthquake in eastern Turkey and returned in August of 1979. When he arrived, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. The earthquake had dropped the soil around the object, and a large crack extended the entire length. He could see what looked to him like the remains of decayed rib timbers along the now exposed sides. Also, he was able to measure the depth of the debris and measure the length. It was 515 feet, or exactly 300 Royal Egyptian cubits. He was now convinced. He carefully combed the surface, looking for evidence that it was a shipwreck. He saw what he believed were petrified structures of an ancient ship whose deck had collapsed. He saw what looked like deck joists and deck support timbers. Of particular interest was the fact that the ship appeared to be impaled on a large outcropping of limestone. He concluded that this indicated that the ship had slid into the rock from another location. Before he made his first trip to Turkey, he had done an experiment in a nearby lake, building mountain configurations out of rocks and floating a boat model by them to see the reaction of the boat. He noted that a crescent shape caused the water to pull the boat into the crescent where the boat remained and gently floated. The present location did not fit with the results of that experiment, so Ron decided to examine the area above the boat shape. The site was in a moving mud flow, so he followed the mud flow up the mountainside. About 1.5 miles up, he found a crescent shape of mountains. He saw that the mud flow began up here. When he arrived near the top of the ridge, he found an ancient stele, like an ancient billboard, which depicted the boat shape, the familiar mountain ridge, several birds, and 8 faces within the boat shape. Clearly, this was a reference to the ship of Noah and its 8 survivors. Ron had brought a metal detector to the site to see if there was a pattern of metal readings. In the presence of Colonel Irwin and others on his team, Ron employed the detectors. He found distinct metal lines down the entire length of the object, while no metal readings were obtained just outside of it. Ron asked Colonel Irwin, who had impressive scientific community connections, if he could have the strange specimen tested. Colonel Irwin sent the specimen to Los Alamos National Labs, where geophysicist John Baumgartner performed the analysis. The results of that analysis captured Dr. Baumgartner's interest. The specimen contained manganese, also titanium and aluminum, among others, and these were not in the form found in nature. Due to the sophistication of the metals, he questioned whether a missile had crashed on the mountainside and Ron had found the remains. The exciting evidences of the metal lines and the analysis of the specimens brought 2 new researchers into the work. Dr. Baumgartner and David Fasold, a marine salvage expert who knew all about ships and their construction. They both joined the team.
Oh, look at that. Oh, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute, let me get a close-up of that. Kind of,
You want my hand in there for?
yeah, just to point at those little flakes of iron that are coming out, like right there. There and there. That's a strong reading. Well,
I'd save those frames right there.
John, as a scientist, might I take the liberty here to ask you, do you really honestly believe that you have been on the remains of Noah's Ark?
I have no doubt in my mind. This has to be a man-made structure. It's full of metal. The metal has a regular pattern to it, and the size of the thing and the shape of the thing is such that it's almost certainly a large boat.
Dr. Baumgardner and Ron scanned the entire site with 3 different types of metal detectors. Placing rocks at each metal reading, they then attached tapes to show the lines. This exciting evidence also attracted the interest of ABC's 2020.
The boat-shaped site was first found and photographed by a Turkish army captain back in 1959. It was quickly explored and dismissed as a freak of nature. But Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, rekindled interest in it a few years ago. He brought in Dave Fasold, a marine salvage expert, to assess it. The Doomsday Mountain team brought in some high technology to explore the oldest legend of man.
there's one.
They began scanning their site with a molecular frequency generator. It's a device used by surgeons to pinpoint cancer tumors, and it's been used by Fasold to locate underwater treasure. This time, the molecular frequency generator began to pick up a unique pattern of iron lines beneath the earth.
Okay, bring that one up.
They began placing ribbons along those lines. The finished shape, outlined by the ribbons, was that of a huge ship, the approximate length and width of Noah's Ark, as described in the Bible.
What you're looking at is Sodom and Gomorrah, a site that Ron Wyatt also discovered by being supernaturally guided there by God. It's a very real place. It almost looks like a community from today. There's houses that are built right on top of these little hills that you see all throughout this area. And you can literally see streets and all kinds of things that let you know that this is a very real location. Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the greatest finds because it's written in the Bible. And it's talked about how God rained fire and brimstone down upon this city and burned it to the ground because they were doing wicked things. Things that are taking place today in 2025. So this is a very real place. And if you take a closer look here, you can clearly see what I'm talking about. This location is at the entrance to the city. And you see clearly what looks like houses on top of the hills over there in the background. But right here at the entrance, what a coincidence to find what looks like a sphinx-like object that has been thoroughly destroyed when God rained fire and brimstone down upon it. Here's what they look like over in Egypt. They're very much like a man-like, animal-like object. Believe it or not, this sphinx is still standing today in 2025.
I drove back and forth through there many times. You have to go past there to get to Kadesh. You have to go past there to get to the Red Sea crossing site. And I did stop and show my workers, my 2 sons and whoever else was helping us, this ash, because the road went right through the middle of it down at the Zoar area. And, I showed them this soft stuff. I said, this is bound to be what's left of those cities.
He and his crew closely examined these desolate areas. Taking samples of the material, they discovered it broke right off in their hands disintegrating into dust, the consistency of talcum powder.
These are the famous brimstone balls that are found in Sodom and Gomorrah and the areas about that, the cities that were burned by God, raining fire and brimstone down on earth. And clearly you can see in this picture here that it has been lodged into the ash, and it appears as though it just kind of fizzled out and stopped burning. You can see how it burned a ring, almost a perfect circular ring around the actual brimstone ball, and left it there for us to find today, because there's literally millions of brimstone balls in the Sodom and Gomorrah area. So this is a very good depiction of what is at Sodom and Gomorrah. Now clearly you can see what looks like a ziggurat off into the distance there, which is a pyramid-shaped building, which is a man-made structure, and clearly it looks man-made. So it's about 4 stories tall, which gives validity to this being Sodom and Gomorrah, because you clearly can see the man-made structures. Now as we pan through the city here, you see a street that goes down through here, and on top of the hills there you see what looks like houses, and you see the rooftops to the houses and the 90-degree angles and so forth, which clearly is man-made. But this object across the valley is absolutely stunning, because it appears to be like cylinder-shaped objects in the middle of this desert location, which, you know, there's no doubt about it. These didn't just appear out of nowhere. These are man-made structures. And you have like 2 cylinders there, one on the left that looks like a typical cylinder, and the one on the right looks almost like a cylinder that's like a upside down type pyramidal shape. And this is clear indications that this is built by human hands. And you cannot look at this and say, oh yeah, that's a natural formation. Well, show me a formation that looks anything like what you're looking at on the screen right now. Anywhere in the world, you will not find it. Only in Sodom and Gomorrah. Ron Wyatt discovered that there are streets here. That's a street right there where that valley is that goes around the building to the left there, and it comes out to the other side. And these streets connect with other streets. So that was one of the most stunning things to find out, that there's actually a community here that you clearly can see was built by human beings.
Before I started using this knife, it was very, very sharp. Okay, here this is, and we have collected some more, and it smells and tastes like sulfur, but we'll have it analyzed. We'll see for sure that is. What appears to have happened is that from somewhere, burning sulfur landed at irregular intervals, as you can see them.
Now clearly you can see this is a building here, and it's a rather large one, and you can see the vertical lines on this building. They're straight up and down. This is not natural at all. Clearly you can see the roof line and the debris above the roof where it burned, and this is absolute proof that there are buildings still standing that are large buildings in Sodom and Gomorrah to this very day in 2025. You can clearly see the architectural detail in this building entrance right here. Look at that archway. It's right there in front of your eyes. That is not natural. And then if you look on both sides of the archway, you clearly see that that was built at like a 90-degree angle, and you clearly see this was built by human hands. And it's all been vitrified. It's all been thoroughly burned through. So this is absolute proof. You see the roof line there, and just below the roof line there, you'll notice a complete flat spot, a 90-degree angle there. That is not found in nature. Straight lines do not exist in nature. These are actual buildings that God's wrath literally burned completely through, and this is a result of what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Now here's one of these sulfur capsules that is embedded in this material, and if you look closely You can see the large amount of sulfur right in the center of the darker ring. And that particular one has a large quantity of just pure sulfur.
When Ron returned from that 1990 trip, he took several of the samples to Galbraith Labs near Knoxville, Tennessee. The yellow balls in the center of the reddish rings proved to be over 95% sulfur.
Now here's a fun fact. The only place you can find sulfur or brimstone balls that are 95% are in Sodom and Gomorrah. They're nowhere else in the entire world. In fact, normal sulfur is only 45% pure. In other words, half the pureness of this. And this sample is over 3,000 years old. So God rained down brimstone balls that are made of pure sulfur, almost pure, 95.72%. Nowhere on earth are brimstone balls found except in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now this is where the Red Sea crossing took place. On the other side from here, that's the Gulf of Aqaba. On the other side is the Egyptian side where Nuweiba Beach is. And Nuweiba Beach is where the Israelites were basically trapped. They came through all these canyons and ended up on the beach on the other side, and they had to get over across the Red Sea here over to this side, which is the Saudi Arabian side. But the only way they could do that is God created an amazing miracle. God literally parted the Red Sea here, the Gulf of Aqaba, and it spread apart so that the Israelites could walk on the sea floor, which is 160 feet below sea level, so that they could escape the Egyptian army and get across the Gulf of Aqaba to this side, the Saudi Arabian side, so that they could get to safety. In 1978, God literally guided Ron Wyatt to Egypt, to the beach of Nuweiba Beach, to try and find the Red Sea crossing. So many miracles happened during this trip, and I'm going to share those with you. He went on an expedition to try and find chariot wheels, was the first thing he did. So he put on his scuba gear and went into the ocean right there off the beach at Nuweiba. And what he found was incredible. He found chariot wheels, which are Egyptian chariot wheels. And he found all kinds of things that led him to believe that this is exactly where the Red Sea crossing took place. And then he found other confirmation right there in the surf. He literally found a column that was made by King Solomon that literally said that this is where the Red Sea crossing took place. There is a gold chariot wheel. You can clearly see the gold is shining there.
A granite column that we first found in 1978. And if you look at the column behind me here, this part was laying down in the surf, and it had, shall we say, been eroded considerably by the surf. This is one of a matched pair of columns set up at the crossing site where the Habiru, led by Moses or Musa, crossed the sea. Now then, the other one is on the opposite shore. The inscription tells that it was set up by order of King Solomon, and it mentions that Pharaoh and his army were drowned by God in the waters here.
This is the pathway that leads to the Gulf of Aqaba. And Ron Wyatt found this when he took a plane trip over the area to try and find the location where the Israelites and the Gentiles were able to cross the Red Sea. So he found this, what's known as the Wadi Watirs there, and it's literally a winding riverbed that's about 75 to 100 feet wide. It's a dry riverbed, so I guess only when it floods does it come down to the beach there. But that's how God guided supernaturally the Israelites to safety right there on Nuweiba Beach. Now it's 8 miles across to the other side to Saudi Arabia in order to get to safety on the other side of Gulf of Aqaba. What you're looking at is the actual site where our Lord Yeshua, Jesus Christ, was crucified on the cross. You have what is an amazing location, because this is right situated 100 yards away from where our Lord Jesus was buried in the garden tomb. He was literally crucified 100 yards away from there, in this location right here. Now, if you'll look where Ron Wyatt is standing there leaning against that rock, you see his shoulder there to the right. So you see how there's dirt behind him there, and he's down in this thing. He literally had to excavate all of that dirt down to where his feet are. So that was a lot of dirt to remove. And when he did, he actually found the cross hole that Jesus Christ was hung and crucified on the cross. It's actually down there by where his feet is, where just about 2 feet to the left of his feet, you'll notice a crack coming down that rock. That's the crack that God made when Yeshua, our Lord Jesus, died on the cross. He made an earthquake happen, and that cracked that rock. It also cracked the cross hole in half, so that basically when Jesus died on the cross and all the blood came gushing out when the centurion speared him, all of that went down the cross into that cross hole, and then it went down through 20 feet of solid rock and landed on the Ark of the Covenant, God's holy throne, which is made out of gold. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. Right now, I just want you to know that Ron Wyatt is the one who discovered where Jesus's cross hole was. Something that I wouldn't even think that it would even be possible, because I would have just assumed that the cross hole was put in dirt. No, they actually chisel cross holes out of solid rock. And that's how they do it, so that they can withstand all of the weight of the cross and whoever is hanging on it.
Hi, I'm Ron Wyatt. Welcome to the Ark of the Covenant dig.
600 years before Jesus Christ died on the cross, God had Jeremiah take the Ark of the Covenant and take it out of the first temple before it was destroyed by the invading armies. And he had him put it into a secret chamber in Jerusalem, 20 feet underground, in a location exactly underneath the cross where Jesus was crucified.
We've been working in this area since 1979, and shall we say it hasn't been an easy job. In 1982, we were able to get into the chamber where we saw some of the furnishings from the first temple. Now, we accomplished that by going down through this hole here.
This is what the Ark of the Covenant looks like in real life. It's literally the throne of God. It weighs over 900 pounds, and it's made out of solid gold. Over to the right is what's known as the mercy seat. Over to the left is what's known as the testimony, where the 2 stone tablets that are written on that have the 10 commandments from God. Over to the right is what's known as God's testimony. That's because that red spot over to the left side of the mercy seat there is a blood stain from Jesus Christ when he died on the cross. The Ark of the Covenant is God's earthly throne here on earth. Now, when Ron Wyatt found the Ark of the Covenant, he didn't find it sitting inside this chamber all out in the open. It was actually inside a stone box that was about 5 feet wide, and as he peered down into the box, he clearly noticed this golden object that he recognized as the Ark of the Covenant. Now, as you come into the chamber, what you'll notice first is there's 2 levels. On the first level, there was gold objects that were covered up by skins, and then on the second level is where he actually found this stone sarcophagus that inside housed the Ark of the Covenant, the greatest archaeological find of all time. You saw the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. Well, this is what they were looking for in that movie, was the Ark of the Covenant, the most precious object on earth today. Now, as Ron entered the chamber on the first level, he noticed the candlestick holder over in the corner there, covered up by some skins, and he also noticed some other furnishings from the first temple. All of these would have been destroyed by the invading armies unless Jeremiah had taken them out of the first temple and placed them in this secret chamber. Now, it's no accident that God had Jeremiah place all of these artifacts and the Ark of the Covenant exactly where they were placed, inside the secret chamber, over 600 years before Jesus was crucified on the cross. And the chamber, where this crack is in the top of the lid there, the stone sarcophagus, it was located exactly under the cross, about 20 feet underground, directly where Jesus was crucified on the cross. No accident. There's a reason, because when the blood dripped down the cross and into that crack, it literally went right down the crack, and the blood from Jesus Christ landed on the actual mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. This was no accident. This was planned out by God over 600 years before Jesus died on the cross. Now, you see where Ron Wyatt is leaning against that rock? That's where Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross. In fact, his cross was put in a cross hole that's right where that arrow is pointing down to. That's where the cross was put into the ground. And do you see the crack in the rock? When Jesus died, God made an earthquake happen, and the rocks went back and forth and made a crack that went down 20 feet down into the chamber, where directly underneath this crack, God had Jeremiah place the Ark of the Covenant, God's earthly throne, 20 feet below where the cross hole was, so that Jesus' blood would go down the cross into the crack in the cross hole and down 20 feet of rock and land perfectly on the Ark of the Covenant, God's throne. So let's hear from Ron Wyatt himself to find out about this magnificent discovery.
On January 6th, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I broke into a chamber beneath the Calvary escarpment north of the city wall of Jerusalem. In that chamber is the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, and several other things that I didn't see. They were covered with animal skins, with boards, and then with stones. We had excavated down that escarpment. We had found 3 cutouts in the wall like a recessed bookcase. We know from the valley north of Jerusalem that the ancient kings and rulers cut these things out in cliffs near populous areas, or where a lot of people would be going by, and they put plaques of stone and whatever else in there bearing messages. We found the cutouts. We found the cross hole. If you read in the book of Matthew and the Gospels where it talks about Christ's death, it says the earth shook violently and the rocks were rent. Right to the left of the cross hole, at the base of where Christ died on the cross, the rock was rent. After Christ died, and the centurion stuck his spear into Christ's spleen, and the blood and water came out, it went down through that crack. It went on to the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant that God had arranged to be hidden in that chamber 600 years before Christ died. Now, what is the significance of this? Psalm 77:13 says, "Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary." On the Day of Atonement, the goat that represented Christ as the sin bearer, after all of the sins were figuratively transferred to its head, was killed. Its blood was taken into the most holy place and sprinkled on the mercy seat. Those folks looked forward to the fact that Christ would die. They confessed their sins on the head of lambs and took the lives of these innocent little animals.
The reason I dug in that particular place was an unusual thing that happened to me. I was walking by there. My sons and I had gone to Israel to get chariot parts out of the Red Sea. Due to my own ignorance and carelessness, I got sunburns so bad my feet and legs swelled up. I couldn't get my diving gear. So we were up hobbling around Jerusalem, waiting for the date that was on our ticket. We got one of those cheap tickets that you can only fly on the proper date. I was walking along and my left hand just went out like that and my mouth said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant's in there." Well, I didn't do that. Deliberately, it happened without my mental intent to do so. And I knew that some supernatural power had used my arm and my voice. I wasn't sure which. So I went back home and started checking to see why the Ark of the Covenant might be there. And the research indicated that it quite likely would be there. Now, when I found the Ark of the Covenant, the lid on the stone box had been busted and slid around, one end of it slid around to the side, and there was dried blood on both edges of that broken lid. And of course, later, when I had access to the mercy seat itself, there was large quantities of dried blood at the ceremony. It's not ordinary blood, folks. It has 24 chromosomes only. All of us here have 46. Unless, there's a couple of genetic anomalies that make that different. But Christ received 23 from his mother and one Y, sex determining factor from his father, who was not a human father. Because had he received that from a human father, it would have been accompanied by 22 autosomes. Now what this basically means is that his height, his eye color, his hair color, and all of this was supplied from the genes of his mother's gene pool. However, Mary and Joseph both descended from David. But none of us have 24 chromosomes.
Now it's time for me to share the two miracles. All the other miracles that you heard about in this documentary are just added to this. So here's the thing. Ron Wyatt spent over $1 million traveling from the United States over to Israel. This man discovered things that nobody had discovered. Until Ron Wyatt, no one knew where Mount Sinai was. No one knew where Noah's Ark was. No one knew where Sodom and Gomorrah was. No one knew where the Red Sea crossing was. But let me tell you something. It's perfectly plausible that one man could have found Mount Sinai. And it's perfectly plausible that another man could have found Noah's Ark. And totally plausible that another man found Sodom and Gomorrah. And another man finds the Red Sea crossing. And another man finds the cross hole where Jesus was crucified. And another man finds out where the Ark of the Covenant is. And another man actually finds Jesus Christ's blood and have it analyzed and find out that Jesus Christ's blood is supernatural. But what is absolutely impossible, there's no way this could happen, would be for one man to find all of those things. Mount Sinai, Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah, Red Sea crossing, the cross hole where Jesus was crucified, the Ark of the Covenant, and a blood sample from Jesus Christ? Are you kidding me? There's no way one man could have done that. And here's the kicker. What you might not know is Ron Wyatt found all of those things in 3 years. That's right. He found everything that had not been discovered for over 4,000 years in some cases in 3 years. That is impossible. The only way that happened is that God supernaturally guided Ron Wyatt to every single one of these locations, just like was explained by Ron and his family. So I'm here to tell you that this is no accident. God wanted all of this information about all of these sites to be known, and God protected them for thousands of years so that you could find out about this information in a documentary like this.